Today I'm going to show you how impressive AI has become already. That's AI. Well, it walks to the left, I know. But would a child holding a Game Boy in her hand for the first time in her life know that? She would have no clue. So does the AI. First, she has to learn. So does the AI as well. This is a very special AI. It's called a neural network. It will first figure out the game. It doesn't know anything about the rules. And will learn everything itself. Let's see how this continues. It already figured out the first rule. On Super Mario, you walk to the right. That's how you do it. Still not that impressive, isn't it? And now it's confused. Walking to the right makes you die. So it will walk to the left again, walk to the right, walk to the left, and after a couple of minutes or hours, it will figure that out. Wasn't that fantastic? Jumping and going to the right. An ingenious combination, and only after a couple of hours. But after a couple of more hours, this will happen. Still the AI. That's the speed the algorithm plays. It figured that out all itself. It learned all the rules. That's not that funny anymore, rather really impressive. To some, maybe even scary. Learning, that's something only biological beings or humans do. Like recognizing patterns, composing music, understanding emotions. Machines now do all of that. 20 years ago, when we would have predicted that for the near future, people would have called us insane. And now we have Mellowmix, for example, an algorithm composing music. It has also released an own album, the first album ever released by AI. It has 70,000 clicks on YouTube. It doesn't sound bad. People listen to that. But what about emotions? It's impossible to understand emotions, right? Emotions are irrational. They're feelings. You can't. An AI can't understand them. Obviously, that's wrong. What are emotions but a signal in our brain that triggers a certain action, a certain pitch in our voice, a certain facial expression? Why shouldn't a machine be able to read that? And that's possible. There's call center software already understanding our emotions and responding accordingly. And at the moment, there's research on AI talking like humans. So if you would yell at it, it could yell back. That's crazy. How does all of that work? What is AI? The Oxford Dictionary says it's the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence. What a horrible definition, isn't it? It doesn't tell us anything about AI in absolute terms. We now know AI does what humans do. But what is that? Can we define it in absolute terms, though? I say no. Because therefore, we had to know what intelligence means. But to make it brief, we've no clue what intelligence actually is. From a philosophical, semantic, neurological perspective, we have no clue. There are tries, like Spearman's G-factor, for example, most commonly known as IQ. But when AI entered the realms of IQ, doing all of that, we just shifted the term. The meaning of intelligence is extremely dynamic. We now talk about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, creativity. 50 years ago, nobody talked about emotional intelligence. It didn't even exist. The word didn't even exist. Now everybody's crazy about it, because we must find something new. That's something machines cannot do at the moment. We always define intelligence, human intelligence as well, as a gap. First it was what animals cannot do, then it became what machines cannot do, and this gap is shrinking with every year. So interesting is now, will this gap continue to only shrink, like Zeno's paradox? It will shrink and shrink, but AI will never transgress human intelligence. Or will there be this transgression? Many historians always say, look, this has happened so many times. In the Industrial Revolution, for example. It killed many jobs, but many more were created. We adapt. And that's true, we adapt. A study of BCG suggests that AI will create more jobs than will kill. Well, I have two counter-arguments. The first one is the speed of adaptation or the speed of change drastically increases. The Industrial Revolution happened over 3 generations. There's time to relearn. The digital revolution is happening within 1 generation, and this speed continues to increase. Also, if there's a transgression, there's no need to adapt. If machines can do every single task better than we do, there's nothing we've left. So is there evidence? This sounds crazy, I know, but is there evidence pointing towards one of these theories? There actually is. This is human performance. This is a very general perspective, but human performance grows in a straight line. Computer performance grows as well, but exponentially. So eventually, there's going to be this moment of transgression, but when? And why is it even exponential? Because of Moore's law. Moore's law is an axiom, but it's pretty impressive still. On the y-axis, it shows the calculations per second per $1,000. On the x-axis, it shows the time. So in 1910, the Hollerith tabulator was able to perform 0.0001 calculation per second per $1,000. Now we have the Intel Core i7 Quad performing 10 to the 10th, that's 10 billion calculations per second per $1,000. But what the heck am I telling you here? Let's put this into context. This is a brain of a mouse. 10 to the 11th, we're extremely close. This is the brain of a human, 10 to the 15th. Okay, a little bit further away. But if this trend continues, we're going to have reached human calculating power in 2030. Google just made an announcement on quantum computing, so it might be true that this will happen even within the next 5 years. That's somehow worrisome. But is this really intelligence? Is it only calculating power? To understand intelligence, we need to understand the brain. When a stimulus enters our brain, it firstly reaches the thalamus. The thalamus then directly connects it to the neocortex. The neocortex is the network in our brain. He decides where the information needs to go, whether it goes to the visual cortex, to the auditory, and so on. There's 2 things about the neocortex. The first one is it makes us intelligent. At least many people believe so. There's studies backing a linkage between the size of the neocortex and intelligence. If you think about the neural network playing Super Mario, this is how it works. It walks to the right, and then it dies, so it gets a negative input. After a few negative inputs, it tries something different, like a jump. If it then gets a positive input, it knows, okay, jumping is good. I jump. This is how it thinks. It's blind. It doesn't see the enemy. When there's another enemy approaching, it doesn't know, oh, I'm seeing this enemy. We humans can do that. We have a neocortex. But it doesn't think like that. So interestingly, it has to walk against it as well. And then after getting the negative input, it can jump. That's a difference. So this narrow AI is not worrisome. Worrisome would be a general AI building this neocortex artificially. And we're very close to that. But there's a second thing about it. Many people believe our free will comes from the neocortex. Or at least the illusion of free will. Hippolyte Taine, a philosopher, said everything we do is an interaction of genetics and environment. He calls it milieu. So I'm standing here on that stage because my genes offer certain probabilistic function. That means there's certain probabilities that 30% maybe that I do that, 70% that I do that, and then a stimulus from my environment comes, and I'll take an action. So in the end, there's no free will involved, but at least we think we have one. Who tells us now that if we build such an artificial neocortex, this thing wouldn't think it has a free will too, making its own decisions, having its own intersubjective view of morality? Why not? That's what people are worried about. But there's still the emotional side of our brain, the amygdala. We don't know much about it, but there are people who lost it in an operation, and that's extremely interesting for science, because we then can see the shift in behavior. We know how non-emotional people behave. They still score as high as before on IQ tests, they're still as intelligent, but somehow they become indifferent. You can ask them a question, they will answer it, but they won't ask you questions. And also, they lose their jobs eventually. Because somehow, and that's the interesting part, we found out that prioritizing is something emotional. But isn't that wrong somehow? All the tools for business decisions, they're so rational. Wouldn't it be better to don't have emotions on your workplace? No, we live in an emotional world. Behind every rational business decision, there's a motivation. Behind that motivation is an emotion. Having emotions when deciding is highly crucial. For your next decision, I wouldn't take the emotions completely out. It makes us decide better. So I'm not worried about an artificial neocortex. This machine wouldn't know how to focus. It would focus on minor problems, maybe. We still would have to give it input. What's worrisome, however, is once we've reached the calculating power, once a computer can do that, and once we've mapped our brain, we could emulate our brain. We could copy it into a computer. But first, I had to convince that this is now me talking to myself in a computer. Isn't that crazy? Also, I'd now be immortal. I'd now have infinite memory. I would have created a whole new race. That's a little bit too crazy. Why are we doing all that? Most of the people say, I don't want that. I don't want to live forever. I don't want to be immortal. Philosophers say, death is what gives life beauty. In 2015, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, and many more all signed an open letter about AI stating that it's the greatest threat we encountered so far. This is serious. AI has already transgressed the realms of science. The question about AI has become a philosophical one. Do we always want to grow? Do we always need more? Growth is something extremely new. This started in the 18th century, where GDP per capita started to grow. Before that, it stagnated. Growth is new. Do we need it? Do we have to? This might be our extinction. We might very well think about it. It became an ethical one. An autonomous driving car approaching a little child on the street should kill either us or the child. Can we code ethics? A regulatory one. What about marrying robots? If they look good, if they behave like us, if people start feeling something. Those are all crazy questions. Funnily, AI is shaping the world we live in already, and most of the people don't even know what it is. Education is the first step in the right direction. If we don't educate ourselves about AI, if we don't take responsibility, we give this out of our hands. I've showed you the neural network today. That's not something dangerous. Dangerous is what will happen in future. We can't predict the future. We don't know. They're scenarios. But if we give this out of our hands, all of those scenarios could happen. And some of them, as we now know, don't look that good. Taking an active position on AI might change that.